So, welcome back to another episode of Therapyology Thursday. We're back with Kris from On a Dragonfly's Wings, and today we're going to talk about policy and politics and how to get involved. So, Kris, thank you for coming on
Yeah,
again.
absolutely.
Last time we talked with Brooke, and you had mentioned that you've done a lot to get involved in like changing things on a macro scale in
Mhm.
regard to suicide prevention and education. So tell me a little bit about your experience.
So my 15-year-old son died by suicide in 2019. And at the time, I was also the president of our local Chamber of Commerce. And we had uh, it's like a monthly like networking event. And I had gone to that event, and it had kind of already been on my mind that I needed to do something, right? I didn't know what it was, but I needed to do something. And I had read about another state had started this program where they put a suicide crisis hotline on the back of school IDs. And I was like, well, that's a great start, right? Like it doesn't fix everything, but it's a really great baby step. And I went to this monthly networking meeting, and at that meeting, State Representative Andrea Schroeder was also there giving a Lansing update. And after the event, I approached her and I told her about the death of my son and what I wanted to do. And she took my information and she gave me her card. And I thought, I'll never hear from her again. She's a politician. And we're all like a little skeptical.
Yeah.
I was, anyways. And within 10 days, she reached back out to me and she said, I'm working on this as a bigger thing. But for right now, I would like to work with your son's school district and her daughter's district and pre-print stickers with the crisis hotline on the back of them and give them to the school as a donation to put on the backs of all of their secondary education students. So that's how it started.
Yeah.
And then once that was completed, she said, okay, now Lansing, here we come. So she drafted a bill for it and she submitted it. And then COVID
Mhm.
and the world shut down. And she kept pushing. So the entire time she was still making phone calls and writing letters and getting support. And in June of 2020, she invited my husband and I to go to Lansing and actually testify
Wow.
in front of the committee to get a suicide crisis hotline on the back of those student IDs across the state of Michigan.
Wow.
So we did that, and that was an amazing experience.
Yeah, I can't
It
imagine.
was very hard, but it was great. And it was a unanimous vote at that committee to move it forward into the House. And it was very interesting, the process just moving forward, how legislation actually works. I learned a lot through this process. And it went to the House, and it flew unanimously.
Wow.
So on both sides of the aisle. And then it went back to a committee, and then we testified again, and it went to the Senate,
Mm.
and it was voted unanimously from the Senate. And Governor Whitmer signed it into law in October of 2021.
Wow.
So um, it's officially law now. So if you're a public school within the state of Michigan, you are required, if you print a student ID, that you have to have some kind of either local or national suicide crisis hotline. The only thing is it has to be manned 24/7. So whatever they put on the back, it has to be something that a student can call, parent can call, and it's 24/7 access. So that's how I got started.
That's amazing. That's just such a incredible like success story, especially considering that people when they think of like getting politically involved, it's met with like a lot of defeat and
Yes.
like not a lot of motivation because you hear so much in the media about nothing ever getting signed into policy, nothing progressing, so much like conflict and especially on topics that you feel there shouldn't be any
Right.
opposition to.
Right.
And so how did you overcome like that defeated feeling that everyone starts off with?
So I didn't really have that feeling
That's amazing.
going into it, which I know sounds very strange, but it was, I'm just going to put myself out there.
I love that. Okay.
Like, this is what I want to see happen, and I'm going to figure out somebody who will help me do it.
Mm.
And Representative Schroeder just, she grabbed hold of it. And I would like to say she's a very different kind of politician. Um, she's very passionate, and this really hit her heart as well. It was very close to her. And so she made it very seamless. And through the process, there were a lot of tears on my end. There was a lot of, I wouldn't necessarily call them setbacks, but just things that, would come up where, legislators would question certain pieces of the law, and we would have to go back and rewrite pieces and, different things. And so it was a little frustrating, and it's the, oh my gosh, it's never going to happen feeling.
Yeah.
But Andrea was just really great about always talking me through it, and just, these are just hurdles. It'll be fine. It's gonna happen. I'm gonna make sure that it happens.
Mhm.
And so it really, she made it very seamless.
Yeah.
Um, I have tried again, and
A little bit less
it's
seamless.
a lot less seamless. And I feel like too, it just, maybe that was an easier law to put into place, because it's not like you're already printing the student ID, so it's not like it's not really costing the school district
Yeah.
additional funds, right? It only impacts them if they actually print an ID card. So I think it was an easier sell.
Yeah. No, I can understand that.
Um, some of the legislation that I tried to kind of push forward a little bit since then has definitely hit some hurdles, and so that's very defeating.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. Do you mind sharing more about like the different things that you've tried to put into place as much
yeah,
as you can or
yeah. So a little bit of what I talked about last time with Brooke. Um, I really, really, truly believe there needs to be an annual education for all public school staff on mental health and suicide prevention. I think it's critical for especially our teachers who see our kids every single day to at least be able to recognize some warning signs, some behavioral issues, maybe some language that's used by our students. Um, it's just critical for them to be able to recognize it, pick up on it, and then know what to do with it.
Mhm.
What are the next steps for them? How do they get that student support?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's a really good line of defense
Mhm.
right there. Our kids spend 8 to 9, hours a day with teachers
Yeah.
and bus drivers, food service, all of those people. And I think it's really critical. And there have been two laws that have been presented to the Education Committee in the Senate, uh, one by a Democrat, one by a Republican. The one from the Democrat went nowhere because the head of the Education Committee was a Republican.
Mhm.
Um, so she contacted a Republican to draft a secondary bill. So this is where mental health and suicide prevention, I don't understand how this is a partisan issue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we're not talking about some of these big global national critical issues. We're talking about mental health, wellness, safety, and suicide prevention of our children.
Youth, right? Like our next generation.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's very hard for me to grasp that we aren't going to talk about it. We're not going to try and push things because we don't like somebody's politics.
Mm.
So it's been very, very frustrating. For the one senator, I literally sent her a letter every other day. And to this day, I've never gotten a response. So it's very hard, to keep positive about it.
Mhm.
Um, and I still write them. I don't write them as frequently. Um, I'm trying to find a different workaround. So I'm going through our local representative and our local senator and see if I can get some pickup there. Um, The other one that's really critical is the funding of 988. So 988 is the national suicide crisis hotline. So it's like 911, but you're calling 988 and it's a mental health suicide prevention hotline. And the funding comes primarily from federal
Mhm.
and it's distributed down to states. But it's really up to the states to fund their state's 988 local crisis centers.
Okay.
Okay, so when you call 988, it looks at your area code and then it routes you to a local 24/7 crisis center.
Okay.
Okay, so that if you do need immediate help, you're already talking to somebody local.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, what's happening is that in some states, well, in no state, we don't have 100% answer rate
Mm.
on the crisis line. In the state of Michigan, the answer rate on the 988 is 80 to 89%, which is good, but that still leaves approximately 20% of people who are sitting on hold or not being picked up. So then it routes back federally. So if it routes back federally, that's cool, except for person that picks up federally may or may not be able to necessarily support you because they aren't local and they're not going to know what your local resources are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an issue. So there's funding issues
Mm-hmm.
for 988 for sure. The Biden administration, I believe it was in May of this year, just delegated another, I think it was I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I think it was like $200 million
Mm.
for funding for 988 that was distributed to states. And then states could take that and then utilize it. But it's not enough. I
No.
mean, we have there's actually a map of the response rate, and there's some, I'm going to call them orange states, that have a 50% response rate on their crisis line.
Okay.
So, that means that only 50% of those calls are actually getting picked up. And we're talking about people who are calling 988 because they're in an immediate crisis and need immediate assistance. So there's some funding issues there.
And it takes a lot of vulnerability and just, I don't even know the right word for it, but it takes a lot of strength to call that number
Yes.
in the first place.
Huge.
And so then to be placed on hold, to have a hurdle to pass in order to do that, I can imagine getting discouraged and
Absolutely.
not continuing with that phone call.
Mhm.
And to think that this is a resource that therapists advise people to utilize, that
Yes.
schools know, and that's falling short as well, that
Mhm.
this is our resource for suicide prevention and response,
Yep.
and even that is falling short, and even with that there's obstacles. It's just so disappointing, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think that anyone would know that information
Mhm.
freely because it's not voiced in the
No,
media, it's not
we don't
talked
talk
about.
about it.
No.
Nope.
It's actually more talked about like this is an active resource that you can use rather than maybe
Correct.
some obstacles so that you can fight for more funding, fight for more response, better response times.
Correct.
Gosh.
Yeah. So, as an advocate, it's it's a lot of work. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's a lot of, trying to stay on top of things, and it's showing up in Lansing and parking yourself in somebody's lobby. Um, it's trying to reach out locally and see if you can make friends
Hmm.
with your local politicians and see if they can help you make a difference. Um, that's where Representative Andrea Schroeder was so good. She has since passed away, so she's not a resource that I have. But yeah, it can definitely beat you down.
Yeah.
Um, it's not for the faint of heart,
No.
but it's important. And if you're really
Hmm.
passionate about something, and it doesn't matter what it is, if it's mental health, suicide prevention, or animal rights, or whatever it is, but
Yeah.
if you're passionate about something, then it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. And it's crazy to think that like you've gone through all of this while actively grieving the loss of your son.
Yes.
And to think like it's already such an emotional subject for people who have not been affected by it, but to imagine like using that passion is just such an incredible thing that you did. And so I think like we couldn't
Mhm.
go through both of these podcast episodes and not like mark on like the tremendous just obstacle and journey that you've used like your grief to do to help support other people is just amazing.
Thank you.
And it makes you like just such a bright and incredible person.
Thank
So
you. Thank you.
that being said, though, how do you manage such an emotional subject and how do you maintain like composure and professionalism and with such an emotional topic and a passionate topic?
Yeah. It's hard.
I'm sure.
It's hard. I I'm able to, I guess, somehow just pull from like there's something inside that just says Nikolai wants me to do this. Like this, like I'm supposed to do this.
Mm,
And so that gives me strength, I guess.
yeah.
Um, and sometimes I hold it together really well, and other times we don't.
Mhm,
And it's okay.
mhm,
Um, I was able to Lansing was actually the one time when I really powered through,
mm.
and
Yeah, I
I
can't even imagine.
I was literally telling my son's entire story to this committee, and yeah, it was the first time really I had talked very publicly about what happened, and um
And how soon after was that?
so let's see, that was just after his first birthday,
Oh my gosh.
after
Okay.
he died. So he passed away June 20th. His birthday was June 2nd. And when we went to Lansing, it was the following June.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, it was hard.
Yeah.
I had been a guest speaker at a couple of suicide prevention trainings prior to that and shared his story to a little bit smaller groups locally. And I never made it through without tears on any of those. But I think the importance of what I was doing in Lansing was just okay, like somehow bite your cheek, whatever you gotta do, but you gotta keep it together until you're done. And I think in that instance too, when you have a unanimous vote to move it on to the House, and then you have legislators coming down and talking to you and being as passionate about it as you, and just the feedback,
Mhm.
it became very joyful.
Yeah.
So I really just try to um, embrace the brave
Mhm.
and uh, do what I think is the right thing to do.
Mhm.
I always say, when you know better, you do better.
Mhm.
And I feel that to my core. There were a lot of things that we didn't know as parents to neglect, things that, you know, I've been able to kind of not feel terribly guilty about it, because you could woulda, coulda, shoulda all day long. But in the time that we were, in the space we were, we did what we thought were all the right things.
Mhm.
And now we've learned more, so now we can do better. And I feel that the more educated people are, that the better that we'll do. And my second favorite quote is be the change. And
Mhm.
that's what this is all about. That's what
Mhm.
advocacy and passion and all this is about, is making a change.
Mhm.
And I always look at like tragic events that happen, school shootings or different things, and people, shout from the rooftops that we need change. That's awesome.
Mhm.
But if you don't act on it, then how does change happen?
Exactly. Mhm.
So I always say, if you want change, you have to be the change.
Mhm.
And that means that you're going to have to put yourself out there and do a lot of uncomfortable things
Mhm.
in order to make a
Yeah.
difference.
That's beautiful.
So,
How do you, a lot of people want to advocate, right? And like be advocates. A lot of people want to get involved politically, but don't know where to begin. So
okay.
where do you recommend like people
Oh,
start?
the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, they're a national organization, but they have local chapters, and we have a Michigan chapter that
Okay.
actually is very highly ranked in the AFSP nationwide. They're one of the most active chapters. They do amazing things, and the one piece that they do have on their website, if you go to afsp.org, and I believe the tab is like make a difference or something like that, but you click on that and it takes you to a map, and you click on your state.
Mhm.
So if you're in Michigan, you click on Michigan, and it will pull up all the state laws that are kind of in that we need help realm. So, like AFSP will say, this is the legislation that we're supporting, that we would like to see passed for mental health and suicide prevention. It gives you links so you can read the legislation so that you have an understanding of what it is, what they're asking for. And then it also has a link directly to your local and state representatives and senators.
Um,
And they take it even one step better to make it even easier on you. Um, they do a form letter. So all you have to do is go in and
Amazing.
put your personal information in it. And I highly recommend in the first paragraph, like they allow you to change. You can change anything, or you don't have to use their form letter, but I highly recommend changing the first paragraph and really talking about what that piece of legislation means specifically to you.
Mm.
Because I think that if you're able to tell people why this means so much to you, it has a little bit more.
Right, yeah, right. Because it's that emotional
Hmm.
factor. It gives people passion, right? Which then
Yep,
turns into motivation and
exactly.
helps you overcome those
Hmm.
obstacles. And so it makes people like grab on more.
Yep.
Yeah. How did you find that organization? Did you just research? Like, how do you even get started in that realm?
So a friend of mine had mentioned doing the Safe Talk training, which is through Oakland County.
Hmm.
She said there's another one through this organization called AFSP, Talk Saves Lives. I looked them up just purely out of curiosity, and um, they do all kinds of different things. So they do a ton of advocacy, but they also do these out of darkness walks where and they always do them in the fall. They're actually going on right now. My suicide loss grief support group is actually participating participating one in Ferndale.
Oh, okay.
So you go, you fundraise, and then all that money that they raise goes towards their advocacy for legislation to make changes nationwide.
Okay.
And so I started just digging and just really liked what they did. I liked their mission. And my family decided we wanted to do an out of darkness walk. So this was 3 months after my son died. And we had probably a team of 100 of
Wow.
our closest friends and relatives that came out, and we had shirts made up that said "Walking for Beans," because that was my son's nickname was Beans. And
Beautiful.
we walked in that walk, and I really have just supported them since. And I've started my own nonprofit since then. So I fundraise more for my own organization. However, uh, I support AFSP through and through, and their advocacy, state, local, and nationwide, is really unparalleled. And if you are really looking to get involved, that
A good place to
that's
start.
a really great place to start.
It's amazing. And it seems like how you initially got started is through talking about
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
Because if you weren't talking with that friend who was able to support you and share that organization, then you wouldn't have been led to that organization and got the motivation to be involved
Hmm.
and begin advocating. And so it really sounds like the first step is just talking
Hmm.
about the issues
Yeah.
and making sure to not shy away from those uncomfortable topics and just
Yes.
be open and talk about it. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. I'm a firm believer in not really hiding your feelings,
Hmm.
good, bad, or otherwise, I suppose. But I made my entire grief journey public, and I
Hmm.
started a grief blog. And so everything that I felt, I just threw it out there.
Yeah.
It was to help others in the same situation, but also it was very therapeutic for me to express exactly how I felt, um, and not feel bad about it.
Hmm.
And I know that I've helped other people in their grief journey also be able to express that. And now I've since started a grief support group. And it's very cool to just, be able to sit together and share and talk
Yeah.
about all of our passions and all of those things. So yes, I think starting talking about it is first step for sure.
Mhm. Well, I can imagine that going through something like that feels very isolating.
Very.
And so creating such an open conversation about it, I'm sure has just changed so many people's lives. And that's just, again, such a beautiful thing that you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Anything else that you think is important for people to know about advocacy and how to get involved?
Nope. Just take the first step.
Hmm.
Just take the first step. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard. There's going to be tears, maybe a little bit of swearing. But it's worth it.
Mhm. Good. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us for like
You're
another
welcome.
episode and
Oh
just
my gosh.
sharing how much knowledge that you have and passion. It's just truly inspiring. So, of
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on again. I really
course.
appreciate it.
Of course. All right. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.